The first coal cars were basically just wheelbarrows with train wheels. We'll talk about that and more fun coal car facts as I sketch this little train car. So let's just turn the page and get started. Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is 5:30 in the morning on a, goodness, is it Monday morning already? Can you believe it's already Monday morning? What happened to the weekend? It wasn't, when it just Friday, just like yesterday? Remember yesterday when it was Friday and we were all excited? We had the whole weekend ahead of us. And now it's Monday. On Mondays, I like to do a little thing where I pull a random object from the Random Object Randomizer, a toy from the toy box, and I draw it and we talk about it. And today's random object from the Random Object Randomizer is a coal car from the train set, from the Safari Tubes train set. Coal cars started off at the Lehigh Coal and Navigation Company as Jimmies. Jimmies were basically just wheelbarrows with train wheels on them to fit train tracks. Started off as just a way to get the coal out of the mine up to the hillside, up to the surface, and they would tie a bunch of them together into a train. And let's see what is happening here. That goes that way. Something weird is happening here. It doesn't look like it's going that way. It looks like it's going this way. It is. It's going this way. It's a toy, so it's bent a little different than it would be in real life, and I'm trying to turn it into a for real rectangle. And I have to remember that it's a toy and that some of the features on the toy are exaggerated. But anyway, so these things started life out historically as basically just wheelbarrows with train wheels on them. And then they started using them to carry coal down the line, and they needed something better than a little wooden wheelbarrow. So in 1896, Carnegie Steel and Keystone Bridge Works made the first steel coal car. It carried 40 tons of coal. You know, the original didn't carry much more than a pickup load, because it's just a wheelbarrow. But the first steel model from Carnegie Steel and Keystone Bridge Works carried 40 tons, and they used it on the Pittsburgh, Bessemer, and the Lake Erie railroads. And it's hard to imagine, for me anyway, it's hard to imagine a beginning to trains. Trains have been around my whole life. It's hard to imagine that this wasn't something they originally thought of. When they first started making stuff to travel, when they first started making trains, why they didn't start with bigger boxes? Why they started with such small trains? Why they started with wheelbarrows, for instance. And then you remember, the niche didn't exist. They weren't transporting coal everywhere. They were using coal where there was coal, and they were using wood where there was wood. But they weren't transporting coal. And then somebody realized they could transport coal and they could sell it nationwide. And so they started doing that. And that's when they start developing ways to transport it.
Hit Claudia's button.
Claudia has a button. Good afternoon, Claudia.
Pamela's here.
I said Pamela. Rick and Pamela have their own have the same button. I could make a separate button for Pamela. I probably should make a separate button for Pamela. But it is so much fun to give them. You know what? I am not digging this at all. We put a lot of effort into getting that just right, and it's just not speaking to me. I started getting into the details before I finished the composition, and I ended up only using a tiny bit of the page. And we can't have that. And we can't be afraid to start over. That angle is killing me though. It's just almost the same angle.
Claudia says bigger and lower.
Bigger and lower, exactly. And lower, exactly right, and not chunky. I have a tendency to draw these things, to draw stuff like this chunky. Again, I have to remember it's a toy. And some of the stuff that I see is because it's a toy and not because of its actual nature. All right, I think we've about established the position. I think that's much better. Just about established the position, so. Anyway, it is hard for me to imagine that they started as anything other than the finished product that they are. Because the finished product makes sense, and the beginning product, like I said, kind of shocks me that they didn't think of that first. Afternoon, Claudia. Good morning, Rick and Pamela. Just because I pushed your buttons doesn't mean that I shouldn't also greet you. Pamela and Rick and Claudia are in the chat. If you're on the vertical side of the chat, feel free to join us on the horizontal side. We're not monitoring the vertical side anymore. It was taking up too much bandwidth. And so we're just going to focus on the horizontal side. But we'd love to have you join us on the horizontal side if you're on the vertical side. Let's see here. These little ridges. How important are these things? 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. There's actually 4 of them there. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Claudia said pushing her buttons counts too.
What's that?
Claudia said pushing her buttons counts also. Then she says the horizontal was always the place to be anyway.
That's right. That's where the happy times are. That's where the party is. The vertical's fun. If you're sitting on a train or something, you can watch the vertical on your phone. But it's hard to chat. It's hard to participate on the vertical. A lot of pencil marks to contend with that make the whole thing confusing to me. So I'm switching to ink. Pen out of ink? No. Talk Harding. By 1909, these things were carrying 70 tons. We said in 1896 they had the steel ones were carrying 40 tons, which was, unheard of. But by 1909, these things were moving 70 tons at a time on the Pennsylvania Railroad. By 1917, the Virginia Railroad had the battleship Gauns, which would carry 120 tons. So in a very short period of time, they figured out coal is profitable and easy to move on train by rail, and so they started making bigger and stouter rail cars to carry the coal across the country. Are you talking to me?
No, your dad said you couldn't talk, you're already.
Yes. Can't talk, arting. From my perspective, this thing is a little warped. The plastic is bent in places it shouldn't be bent. And I want to draw it straight up and down. I want to draw it without all the warpage, because I want to draw what I think it ought to be and not what I actually see in front of me. That wouldn't be right. A little bigger than it should be. All right. Get rid of some of those pencil marks. They're confusing me. In 1901, they developed a way to empty the coal car without disconnecting it. They had swivels on the connectors, so they could just rotate the coal car and dump it over a pit. I'm pretty sure they don't do that anymore. I think they have a hopper now going down the middle. I like to imagine just flipping the whole car over. Because remember, in 1901, it was 40 tons. And I don't know how long they used that mechanism. I don't know how popular that mechanism was. I have no idea how ubiquitous it was throughout the industry. But I thought it was interesting that such a mechanism existed, because I can just imagine driving your train across the pit and just rotating the whole thing over and dumping it. I can imagine that working well at the mine. I can't really imagine that working well throughout the country. All right, let's see here. Start with a little cobalt blue. Jump up to a little Prussian blue. I probably could skip the cobalt and just go straight with the Prussian, but I think it makes it bluer. Little burnt orange. I am going to add just a touch of black. Not much, just a touch. And we'll start in these darkest areas. This is my favorite part of the whole process right here. This is the part that turns the whole thing into a dimensional object. You know, up until now, it's basically just a bunch of lines on the page. This gives the whole thing form.
We had somebody sign in.
Say again, over.
We had somebody on the vertical sign in.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I'm not watching. I can't see the vertical, so I don't know. Unfortunately, I just don't have the bandwidth to run the vertical at the same time. I can go ahead and broadcast on the vertical, but monitoring the chat just isn't efficient. Discovered that it affects the rest of my systems. Love this part. Right, now let's go with a lighter shade of Payne's Gray. I'll get all this stuff that's not in direct light. And then we'll do a drop shadow. Drop shadow should be darker. The wheels don't touch the ground. I don't know if you can see in the picture that the wheels don't touch the ground. I want the wheels to touch the ground, but they do not, because the toy is warped, much like my sense of humor. And the reason that's important is because that's the distinction between drawing this toy, this particular toy, and any other object that I might be drawing. Right. I think that's a pretty good start. Let me dry that real quick and then we'll come back with some vermilion. You think I should add some graffiti letters? Oh, something didn't happen. There we go. Push something that made the screen change. All right, let's come in with let's hit this with some vermilion first.
That's a pretty good train car.
Thank you. I think the technique is pronounced grisaille. But basically what it means is you lay the grays down first. And what I like about it is that when I come back with the color, you know the whole thing's painted with the same color. And rather than adjusting the color for where you are on the train based on the shading's already done. So you can just go over the whole thing with the color that it's supposed to be, and it adjusts the color for you. I'm a big fan of the grisaille technique, and I think it's pronounced grisaille. I'm not real sure. But that's what I just did, was laid the grays down first. That's the gris and grisaille. I laid the grays down first, and that allows for the change in coloration based on the shading without me having to adjust the colors for the edges.
Says you are correct, sir.
I can't hear that without hearing that in what was his name? Ed? Johnny Carson's helper.
Ed McMahon.
Ed McMahon. I can't hear that without hearing that in Ed McMahon's voice. You are correct, sir. What let's do though, we need just a little bit of lavender. It's mostly orange, and so if you want your colors to really pop, use just a little bit of the complementary. Like so. I feel like that shadow could be darker though. Let me dry that real quick and then we'll ink it. Whew, good, because it's already 6 o'clock. Okay. Did I lose some of the highlights? Feels like there ought to be just a bit of highlight across here. Maybe time to change the battery in my eraser. There we go. Add some of those highlights back in before I ink it. I think this curvature on the back was a little exaggerated, and so to straighten it out, where it's too high I'm going to go on the underside, and where it's too low I'm going to go above it, and that'll straighten it out just a little bit so that it won't be quite so exaggerated. The modern hopper is 47 feet long, carries 143, can carry up to 143 tons. That's a long ways from the little Jimmy's wheelbarrows from the 1800s. Bethlehem Steel replaced the bottom hopper with a set of troughs that would churn the coal out of the bottom. And then in 1967, Santa Fe had a dedicated coal rail going across from Mexico to California. I don't remember if it was Mexico or New Mexico. I'm not really sure on that. It had 84 gondola cars, and it was dedicated to nothing but coal. First of its kind, first and last of its kind. A single modern coal car would replace 65 would replace 65 of the Jimmys. If you lined the Jimmys up in a rail yard, it wouldn't fit. If you tried to put as many Jimmys as it would take to replace the modern cars, there's not enough room in the modern rail yard for all the Jimmys to fit. We needed, I think it's Hawaiian Hillbilly Luke to come by today and help us fill in with all the information gaps. That would have been fun. Maybe he'll watch the recording and he can comment on the recording. All right, what is today? 13th? Of July. So there it is compared to the photograph. Let's see it from my perspective. It's a little different. The photograph's a little different than my perspective. And there's still some exaggeration. But I had to make it fun. So there it is. There it is from my perspective. So that's what I did today. Tomorrow, what are we doing tomorrow? Ooh, it's a bingo ball. That means I already know what it is. I'm just keeping you in suspense. I could show you this number, but it doesn't make any difference. It's 134. It doesn't make any difference because this is what we're drawing. It actually does have a tag that says 134. It's a leopard gecko, and I can tell you that the model is a young one. Is supposed to be a young leopard gecko because he still has his stripes. When they get older, they replace the bands with spots. So this is a juvenile leopard gecko. They're one of the few geckos that have eyelids and claws instead of the climbing pads that most geckos have. And most geckos keep their eyes moist by licking them. This guy actually blinks at you. So we'll talk about that and more fun leopard gecko facts tomorrow morning at 5:30 a.m. Texas time. So you are going to want to set your notification bell for that so you don't miss it. But guys, thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. This is my favorite time of the day when I get to art with my besties. I do look forward to it every day. Run down the stairs. Excited to be here, usually because I'm late. Wasn't today, though. I sat down here for an hour before the show started. It was a nice, relaxing morning for me. It holds me accountable to my art practice and is often the only art I get to do in a day. So be sure and tune in tomorrow. Same Artistic Biker time, same Artistic Biker channel. And then we dance. We dance until somebody says they see me dancing, because that is how I know that the lag has caught up to the stream. It gives everybody a chance to click the clicky thingies this way if you're on the horizontal, or this way if you're on the vertical. gives everybody a chance to visit with each other and say hello and goodbye to each other, ask any questions you may have. But the most important thing is that it makes sure I don't get cut off mid-sentence, because being cut